Hi guys, morning, good to be with you. By the power of amazing technology, even though I'm not with you, I'm able to be with you, which may or may not be a good thing, possibly. But I'm going to share a bit of an idea this morning and some thoughts and reflections that I've been having as I've been traveling around and driving around and doing lots of walking recently. We're going to look at a very, very familiar passage very briefly. And a good friend of mine, David, you may know him or you'll recognize his voice, is going to read those for us. And I've got some great images from some walks that I went on with my son a few years ago up in the beautiful Highlands of Scotland. And I'm just going to reflect on a passage which is very familiar, but maybe look at it from a slightly different angle, in a way that maybe helps us to connect with God with fresh eyes. I hope you enjoy this.
Exodus chapter 3. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face, because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now, go. I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Moses said to God, Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, What is his name? Then what shall I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, Say to the Israelites, The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name you shall call me from generation to generation. Psalm 121. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. Isaiah chapter 40. To whom will you compare me, or who is my equal? Says the Holy One. Lift up your eyes and look to the heavens. Who created all these? He who brings out the starry host one by one and calls forth each of them by name. Because of his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint.
So I remember when Ellie would have been about 4 or 5 years old, and Sammy couldn't have been more than 2 or 3. It was one of those exhausting but gloriously wonderful evenings when you're tired to your bones with small children and your kids are finally asleep, and in that glorious innocence of slumber. Those beautiful moments when you can sneak into your child's room, and after the carnage of bath time and the madness of horrors of tea time and meltdowns of, you know, those times of small children, and you just creep in and you sneak a peek at these gloriously silent, beautifully sleeping children. Well, there was one particular night I remember burned into my mind. It was a winter's evening, and it's vividly burnt into my memory. Ellie cutely was having a sleepover in Sam's room, I seem to remember, and they'd been playing dress up and playing all afternoon and been having a really, really wonderful, building castles and playing all day. Lots of laughter, lots of toys, lots of mess. And I remember quietly creeping into their in their bedroom late at night in the evening, just before going to bed myself, barefooted and in pajamas, just to gaze at these two cute, wonderfully, silently sleeping children, to pull the covers back over their spread-eagled bodies. Totally sleeping the sleep of the innocent. It was wonderful, it was beautiful. And I remember then sort of treading back to leave the room, and treading barefoot on a Lego brick. A small one, not a big chunky sixer. No, it was an evil 3-sided skin-shredding monster of a corner piece. And I shriek into my muffled hands, trying to muffle the sound, stuffing my fingers in my mouth in absolute pain. And I hop back on my good foot right onto a set of miniature soldiers, toys from my childhood, toys that actually I had just that day proudly given to my children. And they weren't just your kind of typical English German affair, but they were a Napoleonic set, each with a razor-like base and a Napoleonic sword pointing aloft, ready for battle, ready to make me scream like a banshee. And I screamed. And I can only imagine the horror faced by my children as they now bolt upright in bed in the kind of glooming darkness, with this dark, menacing nightmare before them, hopping from foot to foot, fingers in mouth, shrieking, muffled, screaming in agony, dancing like some crazy ogre, watching me cry and squeal and shouting through clenched mouths. Words that probably no one in my house had ever heard before, in fact. Most of us on a good day spend much of our time feeling warrior-like and invincible, but all it takes is one Lego brick, one tiny saber-rattling grenadier, one insignificant McDonald's Sonic the Hedgehog toy, stumbled upon in bare feet to remind us just how vulnerable you can really be. Because feet are amazing things. Having hiked around the breathtaking Scottish borders, like in the video that you just seen with my friend David reading that wonderful passage. I took that video a few years ago, back with my super fit son Sam, as we hiked around to mark the end of his exams. And on that hike, I became only too aware of my feet. But you know what? Feet are amazing things. There are more than 200 bones in the body, and 25% of them are in your feet. With each step we take, our feet, the major shock-absorbing system in the human body, interacts with more than 100 other muscles, tendons, ligaments and bones. And when we run, our feet are able to stabilise and support the heavy loads that are generated. Loads of between 5 and 7 times our actual body weight. Over a lifetime, the average person circumnavigates the Earth's circumference more than 5 times. Feet are amazing. And so it's no wonder that sometimes they ache. The prophet Isaiah in chapter 52 says, "How beautiful on the mountains are the feet of those who bring good news." Feet are amazing. Yet they're also incredibly sensitive and vulnerable, which is why we wear shoes. Shoes form a protective shield between those precious feet and the rest of the world. Shoes protect us from injury. They make it much easier for us to get out and about, to walk, to run risk-free, pain-free, to launch ourselves out into the world. But you know what? I think shoes do something else too. Now, I don't know about you, but I've got super ticklish feet. I really hate people touching them. And I know plenty of people can be really funny about their feet too. I don't know if you've ever seen or been at a foot washing event at church. There's always so much awkwardness. Interestingly, a few years back, for those being ordained within the Church of England, when you become a vicar, it's a celebrated tradition that on the night before you become ordained as a vicar, the bishop, chief, he kneels before you and washes your feet. Or actually, more technically correctly, washes your foot. He washed 1 foot of each person for those who are coming to be ordained. And I remember that night. It was a special night, actually. But it should be added, you have never seen such a bunch of more deeply scrubbed, manicured and presentable feet presented to a person than on that night, which I guess is where the phrase putting your best foot forward must come from. I think for most people, removing their shoes in public, especially in a formal or a social setting, might seem a bit unthinkable and quite intimidating. It just feels inappropriate to do that, to take your shoes off. Because when you take your shoes off, people will see your feet. It's both intimate and a bit vulnerable, maybe. In a formal setting, it would seem completely unseemly or inappropriate. Kicking off your shoes implies that you're off duty, you're at home, casual, relaxed. And in a formal setting, when we're at work, we wear shoes. Shoes make us feel less vulnerable. They make us feel properly dressed, more acceptable, more appropriate. But beyond style and design, they're probably simply an unthought of, rarely considered barrier between us and the dust that Genesis tells us that we all come from. But probably also they're a sign to us and to others that we're ready for action, ready for work, ready for play, ready for school, ready to step out, ready to go. I mean, it's the refrain in every household around the country, isn't it, for those with families? Have you got your shoes on? We need to go. So with that in mind, I'm really, really intrigued by what God says to Moses in that reading we heard earlier. In fact, it's one of the first things that God actually says to Moses before he gives him the law or the 10 Commandments, before he tells him to go down, Moses, to Egypt and tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. Before all the signs and the wonders and the miracles, God says to Moses, take your shoes off. Take your shoes off, because the ground on which you're standing is holy. Now, I know there's a lot to be said in this account for an honoured, humble position of submission before a holy God. And I guess that's how I've always simply understood this passage. And clearly there's truth in that. But do we really think here that God's worried about Moses trampling dirt around his burning bush in the same way that my mother rightly worries about her best Axminster? I'm not sure. I mean, I just wonder if there's something else going on here. Because you see, Moses, he's a man of action, a man of strength and knowledge. He'll have had all the best Egyptian teaching and wisdom. He's a man of real conviction and determination too. He's known power and authority, perhaps even pride. He's certainly walked in and exercised that power as kind of a son of Egypt, brought up with all that knowledge and teaching and expertise and power. And shoes? Well, they maybe give us just enough lift above the earth, above the dirt, to feel superior, to feel secure, to feel powerful. Maybe not much, but just enough to feel comfortable, significant, safe and secure on solid ground. I should underline, I'm not an expert, but as I understand it, they're not called power heels for nothing. So I'm told. And so visiting the Far East, Sri Lanka, as I've had the privilege and joy of doing several times over recent years, I'm always fascinated visiting and staying in houses as a guest, where the customer, you leave your shoes outside at the door before you go in. It's, not, of course, not uniquely Sri Lankan, I'm sure. In Japan, taking off your shoes is widespread 1,000-year-old custom. And yes, partly that is to help keep houses and floors clean, but more importantly, and this would be true in most of our homes, taking your shoes off, well, it allows people, especially guests, to simply relax, to be themselves. So if that's true, what if in this account in Moses' life, what about if it's more than a lesson in humility and etiquette? Maybe it's rather that the Father is longing for Moses to drop his guard, his history, his stature, his bravado, to drop his defences. Maybe, just maybe, the Lord's really wanting Moses to take himself less seriously, to take his shoes off, because he simply longs for Moses to be himself, to remove all show and to be nakedly vulnerable and open to what God's about to say to him. And if that's true, what might that mean for you and me today? God wanted Moses, with all his gifts, qualities, flaws and weaknesses, simply to be Moses, not someone else, not to hide behind a mask, not pretending to be a better version of himself, but to simply be himself, to do the very things that God was calling him to. And as such, he simply needed to come, vulnerable, open, ready to be used despite those flaws, weak, so he could depend upon God and see and experience the miraculous saving power of his sovereign Lord. God's voice to Moses, God's voice to you and me is like this. Moses, Tim, take your shoes off. I need you, not Abraham or Isaac or Jacob, not the Apostle Paul, not someone with a PhD in theology or a George Cross for gallantry. I just want you. I know you. Sit with me, share with me face to face, honestly and simply, friend to friend. I've got a plan that I'd love you to be a part of. And Moses, just like you and me probably, free and able to be totally honest in this place of peace and friendship, say, who, me? You got to be kidding. And the rest, well, the rest is history, isn't it? We know the story. And for you and for me, what an invitation. Invited to kick your shoes off and made to feel right at home in the presence of the King of Kings. Friends, not servants. Jesus says, sit with me, share with me, listen to me. I've got a great idea and I long for you to be a part of it. And when in that place of rest and safety, we respond, who, me? You've got to be kidding, right? The God of all creation, who welcomed us to sit and eat with him, says, don't worry, I got it covered. I'll give you everything you need, and together you'll see signs and wonders you could never have imagined. Come, Let's walk together.